Chapter 3, Seth. Seth didn't know anything about farming, but he was pretty sure that the stuff growing in Mr. Antos's field was not broccoli. It was tall and black and spiky, and seemed to have shot up overnight as the rain hammered on the roof. Even as he slept, he was aware of it, and of the aching in his arms and hands, a weird, impatient pain in his joints. He had a dim memory of pain like this when he was little, like growing pains. Wasn't that what they called it? And just before dawn, the rain had stopped and had drifted off until the smell of coffee and bacon woke him up. He turned away from the window and pulled on some clothes. He'd lived in a lot of places, but never on a farm. As he went downstairs for breakfast, he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually felt like leaving his room. Even having his own room was pretty rare. "Well, it stands tall, almost like bamboo," Mr. Antos was saying, coffee in his hand, gazing out the window at his field. They got up early, Mr. and Mrs. Antos. They always told Seth he could sleep in on the weekends. But Seth was an early riser, up with the birds. Anyway, he liked their Saturday breakfasts: bacon, fried eggs, blueberry pancakes with butter and maple syrup, and toast, if he had any room left. In his last place, they'd just line up a few boxes of cereal on the counter. "Well, I'm going to ask Mike Riggs to come have a look," Mr. Antos said to his wife. "He might know about this stuff." "Good idea," Mrs. Antos said. "Pancakes, Seth?" A place was already set for him at the breakfast table, like that hoped he would join them. Sitting, he speared several pancakes with his fork. The Antos's dog, an old, friendly lab called Maddox, nosed around under the table, brushing Seth's legs, hoping he'd drop something. "Mike's with the Ministry of Agriculture," Mr. Antos told Seth, joining them. "They've got an experimental farm here on the island. He's their weed expert. Maybe he can tell me how to tackle this." "You probably know his daughter, Anaya," said Mrs. Antos. "She's in your grade, I think." Seth nodded. Just yesterday she'd taken his picture for the yearbook. She wasn't pretty like Petra Sumner in his English class, but she was friendly and had felt at ease with her, which was weird because it usually took him a long time to feel comfortable with people. With Anaya, though, it was like they'd already met. "A nice girl," said Mrs. Antos. "Poor dear's allergic to everything under the sun. I can't even imagine." Seth doubted the Antoses had ever been sick a day in their lives. They were both bigger people. They had bigger heads and the biggest hands he'd ever seen. They could pick big things up and move them anywhere they wanted. They were always working. They made Seth feel weak and spindly and tired just watching them. "We can't force you to help out," Mr. Antos told him when it first arrived, "but we think you'd really enjoy it. It's very satisfying, and knowing how to grow your own food is a pretty useful skill." The first few weeks, Seth hadn't helped out much. He kept to his room. He sketched, plugged into his headphones, with his mind as far away as he could fling it. He'd never been a talker. He hadn't been convinced there was much point in making an effort, or getting used to anything. He tended to get moved around. There were all sorts of words to explain why. A family might have a change in priorities, or there was a personality conflict, or certain needs that weren't being addressed, or there were insurmountable challenges as a result. After his last family, his social worker, Shayla, had asked him what he thought about living on a farm. And it was funny. People were always asking how he felt about things, but it seemed dumb because it wasn't like he had choices. He didn't have all these families lining up for him. He went where they sent him. Shayla had said the Antoses were an older couple who wanted to welcome a young person onto their farm. Their own children were grown up now and had left the island, but the Antoses were in good health and still farmed organic vegetables. Shayla told him this was a great place for him. Seth asked her why. "The country," she'd said. "The fresh air, the chance to be active and get in touch with the earth and cycles. It's a new start." Seth should say, "You've had your share of rough patches. You don't have too many years before you're of legal age, and then you're on your own. So right now you've got a chance to think about your future. What kinds of things you might want to do? School? Job? Whatever. I think this could be a really good place for you. They're good people, Seth, and I told them you were a good person who would thrive in their home. Seth didn't feel like he'd thrived anywhere yet. The Antoses were his 7th family since his mother gave him up. In the early days, he felt like he was waiting for something. Maybe his mom coming to take him back. But as the years went by and she never came, he knew it wasn't her he was hoping for. It was something else that he still couldn't quite figure out. Maybe the small new feeling he had with the Antoses, maybe this was it. He liked the island. It was the first time he'd lived near so much water. He liked the way you could see the weather coming, the way the lights slanted low in the mornings and evenings. He felt like something better might be starting. "I'm going to weed after breakfast," Mr. Antos said. Seth hadn't taken much interest in farming. He didn't know anything about how you planted things or take care of them, but for the first time he thought he might want to. Can I help?" he asked. If Mr. Antos was surprised, he showed no signs of it. "Oh, you certainly can. I'm not planning on losing my crop to this stuff. Eat up." As he got up from the table, he put his hand briefly on Seth's shoulder. It didn't feel like other hands that had been placed on him. He looked at his plate for a moment, just breathing, feeling the warm imprint of Mr. Antos's hand. After helping clean up breakfast, Seth went out to the field with Mr. Antos. There were 8 rows of the small green broccoli seedlings Mr. Antos had planted just 2 weeks ago. The black grass grew between the rows, sometimes right up close to the plants. Seth walked in for a better look. The grass had no leaves, but spiky hairs spiraled up its stalks. He touched a smooth bit. It was hard and completely black, not even a hint of color. It was like something that didn't belong. The blackness of it kept pulling his eyes back, like it had a gravitational force and was swallowing light itself. Seth got his first lesson in using a hoe. Mr. Antos gestured a lot with his massive hands, and his instructions were calm and clear. "Usually weeds just rip out fairly easy," he said, demonstrating. "But these guys are stubborn." With small, strong blows, he chopped away at the base of the black grass. It took 3 tries before the stalk fell over. "Ha! Deep roots," Mr. Antos said, bending down and making a small cluck of disapproval. "You'll want to angle that blade to get them up." Seth took his hoe and started on the next row. It was hard, but he liked it. "Good work," Mr. Antos called out from the next row over. After an hour or so, they took a break, and Seth was soaked with sweat, and his arms ached, but in a good way. They drank water from the outdoor tap and sat on lawn chairs. "Good thing you had a second helping of pancakes, huh?" said Mr. Antos. Seth gave a quick grin. "I love the smell of the earth. It always makes me feel a bit younger. You ready for some more hoeing?" Seth nodded. After a while, he suddenly realized he hadn't been thinking about anything else. It was such a relief to feel so calm inside. He came to a thick stalk, and even after he hacked at its base 5 times, he couldn't chop it down. He grabbed it and yanked. His hand skidded along, and he winced as a line of pain cut across his palm. He looked down and saw the bright blood. "You get cut?" Mr. Antos said, looking over. He put down his hoe and walked over. "Let's get that cleaned up." "Oh, it is not that bad." "We both need gloves with this stuff." At the tap, Seth washed off the blood, and Mr. Antos came back with a dishcloth, gloves, and a box of Band-Aids. "Hey, listen, take a break if you want," said Mr. Santos. "No, I'm good," said Seth, and took the pair of gloves Mr. Antos offered. Close to noon, a truck came up the driveway and parked. Seth watched as Anaya hopped out of the passenger side. His stomach knotted up a little. He had expected her to come too. So she walked toward the field with Mr. Riggs, arms jostling, talking animatedly, and Seth thought, that's how someone walks with their father. Mr. Antos went to greet them, and for a second Seth wavered. He was used to hanging back, and then he remembered how Sheila was always saying he should make an effort with people. He stood tall, stretched, He realized he genuinely wanted to talk to Anaya. "Hey," she said when he walked over. "Hi." She sneezed and blew her nose, which was red at the end because a lot of her face was splotchy because of the acne. He could tell she was self-conscious about it because she kept resting her head on her cheek like she was trying to cover it up. He knew what it was like to be different, feel different, to want to hide away some part of yourself. He liked how lively and intelligent her eyes were, and he already knew she was smart. In math class, she answered more questions than almost anyone. He wondered why she'd come along today. Probably she just liked spending time with her dad. Maddox, the dog, ambled over to greet her, and she dropped to her knees to pat the dog enthusiastically. "Hey, gorgeous," she said, burying her hands in his fur. Maddox literally lapped up her praise, licking her face. Anaya grinned at Seth. "I'd love a dog, but..." As if on cue, she sneezed 3 times in a row. "Shoo! Choo! Choo!" "Allergies," she said. Yep, she stood and took a hit on her asthma puffer and looked out over the weed-infested fields. "Man, look at all this stuff." "You're not alone," Mr. Riggs was telling Mr. Antos. "I've had other calls. When did you first notice it?" Mr. Antos shrugged. "All has happened overnight." Anaya's father took a cloth measuring tape from his pocket and held it against one of the standing stalks of black grass. 3 foot 4 in, let's say, 12 hours? Mr. Riggs whistled softly. "Whew. That's a lot, right?" Seth asked. "Sure is," replied Mr. Riggs. "There are species of bamboo that grow 3 feet in 24 hours, but this is twice as fast." "We have some in our yard that's even taller," Anaya said. "I saw it yesterday when I got home from school. This morning it was like we had a hedge." "This isn't something you're familiar with?" Mr. Antos asked Mr. Riggs. "Something like you've seen on your farm?" Anaya's father shook his head. I posted it on Plant ID this morning, and I'm waiting to see if we get any matches." Anaya grinned at Seth. It's a site for plant nerds. They post pictures of weird stuff from all over the world and ask if anyone knows what plant it is. "People are usually pretty quick," Mr. Riggs said. "Anyways, I'll know more Monday when I talk to the ministry." Mr. Antos blew air from his cheeks and looked out at the fields. "Lucky I've got an extra hand here, you know." He nodded at Seth. "Looks like you guys have got a good start on it," Mr. Riggs commented. "You might want to spray." "My customers expect herbicide-free, though," Mr. Antos said. "I know it's a tough call," Mr. Riggs said, "but spraying could be your only chance. This stuff is aggressive. It might crowd out your entire crop." Mr. Antos looked at Seth and said, "What do you think, Seth?" Seth blinked, wondering if Mr. Antos was seriously asking his opinion. If it's between something or nothing?" "Ah, true pragmatist," Mr. Antos said. "We'll see how it goes. Thanks for coming by, Mike." "No worries," said Anaya's father. "If you don't mind, I'm going to take one of these guys back to the farm with me." "Ah, please take them all," Mr. Antos laughed. "But use my gloves. Seth already got cut." "Here, I'll do it," said Seth. He grabbed it with both hands and yanked. It took 2 tries before the stalk ripped free, trailing soil clump roots like jellyfish tentacles. He handed it over to Mr. Riggs. "Hey, thanks, Seth." Mr. Riggs took hold of it carefully and gave it a shake. "Sheesh! Deep roots and a couple of rhizomes already coming off of it. Huh." "What are rhizomes?" Seth asked. Anaya explained. "They're underground shoots the plant sends out to start a brand new plant." Seth heard Mr. Antos gave a sigh. "Ah, which means tomorrow we could have a whole new crop." "See you Monday," Anaya said to him with a backward wave as she returned to the truck. Bye." After the Riggses left, Seth finished hoeing with Mr. Antos and then went upstairs to take a shower. Water streamed around him. It felt good hitting his skin. He soaped up real good. He counted the small pink scars. Soon you'll forget you ever had them, he said to himself. That's what the surgeon had said. after the operation. He'd smile when he said it, trying to be kind. Soon, you'll forget you had those scars. Seth remembered that smile, those words. The doctor was wrong. Seth had never forgotten them. Driving to the experimental farm with Dad, Anaya saw the black grass everywhere, growing from ditches alongside the road, stabbing up from lawns. Some people were already out with their mowers and weed whackers. Sheesh, said Dad, this stuff is speedy. Dad said a lot of things like sheesh and wow and oh boy. He was a pretty quiet guy, but when he talked about plants, he got very excited and talked like everyone in the world was just as enthusiastic. Sometimes he referred to plants as guys or dudes and he used words like sly or wondrous when describing them. Anaya kept glancing at the rearview mirror. In the bed of the pickup, the black grass slid around, its roots like waving in the breeze, like they were alive. This is what you'd call an invasive species, right? Anaya asked. Yeah. I have a feeling this scoundrel's going to cause a lot of grief on the island. Anaya couldn't help smiling. Scoundrel. Seth seems like a nice kid, Dad said. Yeah. On the way over to the Antos farm, she told her father about how she'd met Seth yesterday at school and seen like some scars. She'd come because she liked helping Dad, but also she wanted to see Seth again. She didn't like him or anything like that, but for some reason she just found him intriguing. He seemed pretty happy, actually, just a nice guy. Maybe it was just seeing him outside with a rake instead of hunched up in a dark stairwell, and she got the feeling he was glad to see her too. It was just a nice friendship. Dad nodded. He's ended up in a good place. I like the Antoses. The parking lot of the experimental farm was deserted when they pulled in. Dad grabbed the plant from the back of the truck and they walked past the humble collection of buildings and greenhouses to the fields. Well, I certainly don't need to plant a trial plot, Dad said. Everywhere Anaya looked, the black grass was already bristling up. The good news, Dad added with a chuckle, is at least I found something that outcompetes that rotter over there. He pointed. Anaya looked at a plot where small, boring green weeds were now impaled by the black grass. What was in there? She asked. It was a big, like garlic mustard. Grows like crazy and releases alamones. Alamones? Sometimes Dad forgot that not everyone knew all the special plant words he did. Yeah, alamones. Yeah, they're like chemical weapons. The garlic mustard wages warfare in the soil. It releases like these chemicals from its roots to keep anything else from growing. Basically, it poisons the soil for other plants. But not the black grass, Anaya said. No. Seemingly, the black stuff's immune. It just out-bullied the bully. One tough customer. Want to help me spray? One of the things she liked best about hanging out with Dad was that he let her help. Even after she became allergic to everything, he didn't treat her any differently. Still, whenever she worked outside with him, she always made sure she had her puffer and her EpiPen handy, and that she wore sunglasses, and that she took her pills, a double dose of antihistamines today, because the pollen count always spiked after a big rain. So far, she wasn't doing too badly. She helped Dad stake out 4 separate plots of black grass. They sprayed the first plot with Roundup, the second with fluorozipper, and the third with triclopyr, which Dad said killed pretty much everything. The last plot they just left alone, so they could see how tall the grass would grow naturally. Afterward, they went inside the laboratory and cleared space on a table for the black grass they'd taken from the Antos farm. So let's take a look at our friend here, Dad said, adjusting a flex lamp. What do you think it is? And I asked. My guess it's a species of phragmites. Oh boy, and I heard another word. Phragmites? It sounds like some kind of superhero. Just about. There's a strain that's gotten into Ontario. Wow, grass. Stuff grows 10 feet high. Almost impossible to get rid of. So what do you notice about this guy? She liked the way he asked for her opinions. It's really thick, lots of roots. Those spikes are wicked. And the black color, there's no other plant that color, is there? There's stuff called black Mondo grass, but it's more purpley. No, this stuff is truly black, which means it can photosynthesize any wavelength of light, which is pretty cool, right? This guy's adaptable. So if it's not black Mondo or fragmites, what is this? No idea. It's probably always been around. We've just never noticed it. But I think I'll send this guy out for genetic testing. He got up and started to prepare a specimen bag. Someone else on Plan ID might have seen us by now. You mind opening up my laptop? I'm still logged in. Sure, Dad. Dad had shown her the site plenty of times, and every time she was amazed how many freaky plants there were out there. She flipped open the laptop and swallowed. Dad? He was labeling the bag. Yeah, uh-huh. You've got, over 200 messages. Before she could even start reading, 3 new messages scrolled onto the screen. Dad dropped the bag and sat down in his chair. He rolled the messages back to the beginning and clicked the first one. A picture of the black grass popped up. It said, "Seen it, not black Mondo grass, no idea what it is." "That's from Vancouver," Anaya said, reading over Dad's shoulder. Click after click, more pictures of that black grass. More bewildered comments. "Portland, Oregon," Dad murmured. "Little Rock, Arkansas." "Already 4 feet tall, my barley. Anyone else?" it said. Click. Next message. "New Orleans," said Anaya, reading the locations. "St. Lucia?" Click. Photos of black grass jutting up among banana plants. Click. Black grass rising from people's gutters in Finland. Click. Black grass reaching skyward alongside the Great Wall of China.